If you aren't familiar with pivot tables, that's something you definitely need to learn. I'm not going to get into too much detail on pivot tables. That can make a whole nother class for itself. I'll probably make one. But for right now, we're just going to talk about how to use our pivot tables even faster using some shortcuts. So, the first thing you do is select all the data for the pivot table, then you create that pivot table, and then you can navigate the pivot table. I'll be honest, some of this stuff actually can be done faster using the mouse, but we're going to show you the shortcuts and how to get there, because you can move faster once you're not dependent on the mouse. But if you're going to use the mouse, this is one of those examples where you would do it. Check it out. So this is kind of a review from earlier, the Ctrl A to get the whole selection, where you can Control Shift and move your arrows around. But to create the pivot table, you do Alt N and V, and then you can move around with Alt JTL. You hit Alt JTL again to go into the specifics of the pivot table, and then you can move around using these shortcuts here. Yeah, it's a lot easier to explain with the demo. Let's jump in and learn more about our pivot tables. The pivot tables, they're actually a lot of fun to use, and I'll admit that they're not as smooth on the keyboard as they could be, so I don't blame you if you want to stick to the mouse, but sometimes it's good just to know an extra way to get things done. I'd say about half of this stuff I prefer over the mouse, so you're going to see what I mean in just a second. Let's just jump right into it. First, we're going to start by creating a pivot table. Here's our data. We've got 3 tables here. Let's start with this transactions table right here. Let's go across. We select the entire range of data, and then you're going to press Alt N and then V. That brought up our pivot table dialog box. So it's already got the demo range there. It's telling us we're going to do it in a new worksheet, which is cool with me. So all we got to do from there is press the enter button. That's a really quick way to create pivot tables. Just select the range and then hit those hotkeys. I use that every time. I never use the mouse. I probably can't even find where it is in the ribbon. Here's where it gets a little bit murky sometimes. The next thing we're going to do is move to the table. Okay, so we're going to have to hit these keys in sequence. Alt JTL. Alt JTL. So that pulls up the dialog box. Now that it's up there, we can tab between these sections and we can add the things that we want to add. So let's add the salesperson ID, that'll be a good one. And you see how it put it over in the corner? That's where it starts to get not as fun. Let's just add the things we want here. We'll move them around with the mouse. That looks a lot better. So you got our salesperson IDs and the amounts over here. If you want to go back over to this table, press Alt JTL again, Alt JTL, and now we got rid of the options that were to the right, and we're just playing around in our pivot table. So once you have that in place, we can navigate through this using tab. But remember Alt N on the filter, or sorry, Alt down on the filter. It works just like a filter. The pivot table has the same setup, so you can organize it by largest to smallest. You can jump into the sorting options. You can add value labels or filters by using tab, the arrow keys, and the spacebar to select things. So let's search for the number like 10 and 1. So anything that starts with a 1. So we can just, we just tab down. So hit the select all to take everything off, and then select 1 and 10, and then press enter. Now we have just that salesman 1 and salesman 10. So that's how you create the pivot tables and play with them using just the shortcuts. Out of that, the thing that's really helpful is just selecting the range. Let's just do it with Control A. So we got that whole thing right there. Control A and then Alt and V. So if anything, just remember that, and then you hit the enter button, and then you have a pivot table super quick. Remember that shortcut. That's going to be really fast. Otherwise, you have to key through a bunch of tables up here. So you go insert and then pivot table. Same thing, but it's just way faster just to hit the keys when you're already there. So hope you learned something new.